When Marcus pulled out that crumpled governor's letter at the locked ranch gates, the armed guards laughed until they read the signature and realized they'd been holding the wrong man prisoner for 3 days. The dust cloud kicked up by Marcus Rivera's pickup truck hung in the desert air like a warning as he approached the Blackstone Ranch gates. 3 days since his daughter Sophia had texted him from inside those gates. Her message cut short mid-sentence. "Dad, something's wrong here. They won't let us. Nothing since." The massive iron gates loomed ahead, flanked by 2 men in tactical gear who stepped into the road with the casual confidence of people who'd never been challenged. The taller one, a man with a scar running from his left ear to his jaw, raised his hand. "Road's closed, friend," Scarface called out, his rifle held, low but ready. "Private property. Turn around." Marcus rolled down his window, his weathered hands steady on the wheel, despite the rage burning in his chest. "I'm here for my daughter, Sophia Rivera. She's been working the cattle drive for the Blackstone family." The shorter guard, barely out of his teens but carrying himself like a veteran, shook his head. "Nobody in, nobody out. Ranch is under lockdown. Governor's orders. Governor's orders." Marcus's voice carried a dangerous edge that made both men shift their stance. "What governor's orders?" Scarface stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could see the fresh scratches on his tactical vest. "Health emergency. Potential contamination. Everyone inside stays inside until further notice." Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. Sophia was trapped inside with whatever these men were covering up, and they were using government authority to do it. But these rent-a-cops had made one crucial mistake. They assumed he was just another worried father. "I need to see that order," Marcus said, stepping out of his truck. The young guard's finger moved to his trigger guard. "Sir, I'm going to need you to get back in your vehicle, and son," Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying 30 years of command authority. "Before you do something you'll regret, you might want to know who you're talking to." He reached into his jacket pocket, moving slowly and deliberately. The guards tensed, but Marcus pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn from handling, but still bearing an official seal. "Marcus Rivera, Special Investigator, Office of the Governor," he said, handing over the document. "And I'm here to find out why you're running an unauthorized lockdown on private property." Scarface's face went pale as he read the letterhead. The younger guard peered over his shoulder, his bravado evaporating like morning dew. This says you have full investigative authority," Scarface stammered. "It does." Marcus stepped closer, his presence suddenly seeming to fill more space than his average frame should allow. "It also says I can override any local security measures that interfere with my investigation. So you're going to open those gates, or I'm going to have you both arrested for obstruction." The guards exchanged nervous glances. The younger one pulled out a radio. "Base, we have a situation at the main gate." Static crackled before a gravelly voice responded. "What kind of situation, Tommy? We got a state investigator here. Says he's got authority to override the lockdown." A long pause. Then, "Bring him to the house now." As the gates swung open with a mechanical groan, Marcus climbed back into his truck, his mind racing. The authorization letter was real. He'd earned it after exposing corruption in 3 counties last year. But this wasn't an official investigation. This was a father using every tool at his disposal to save his daughter. The road to the main house wound through rolling hills dotted with cattle, but something was wrong with the scene. The animals were clustered in unusual patterns, avoiding large sections of pasture, and there were too many vehicles, black SUVs and white vans, that had nothing to do with ranching. Marcus's radio crackled to life on the emergency frequency he monitored out of habit. "All units be advised, subject Marcus Rivera is en route to main compound. Exercise extreme caution. Subject has legitimate state credentials, but is operating outside official capacity." His blood ran cold. They knew exactly who he was and why. He was here, which meant Sophia's disappearance wasn't random. It was connected to whatever operation they were running. The main house came into view, a sprawling structure that had been in the Blackstone family for 4 generations. But today it looked like a command center, with satellite dishes, generator trucks, and enough armed personnel to invade a small country. Marcus parked near the front steps and was immediately surrounded by 6 men in matching black tactical gear. But it was the woman who emerged from the house who made his pulse quicken. With recognition, Dr. Catherine Voss, he'd investigated her 3 years ago for falsifying environmental impact reports. She should have been in federal prison, not standing on the porch of a cattle ranch giving orders to private security. "Mr. Rivera," she said, her smile as cold as her reputation. "How unexpected, though I suppose I should have anticipated that. Governor Chen's favorite bloodhound would eventually catch our scent." "Where's my daughter?" Marcus demanded, his hand instinctively moving toward the service weapon he still carried from his law enforcement days. "Safe," Dr. Voss replied, "for now, but I'm afraid she wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. You see, we're conducting some very important research here. Research that certain parties would prefer remain ... undisturbed." One of the tactical team members whispered something in her ear. Her smile widened. "Ah, and it seems your famous intuition has led you into a trap, Mr. Rivera. You see, while your credentials are legitimate, your presence here is not authorized by any official investigation, which means you're trespassing on private property during a government-sanctioned quarantine." Marcus felt the walls closing in, but his years as an investigator had taught him to always have a backup plan. "Actually, Doctor, you're wrong about one thing." He pulled out his phone and held it up, showing a recording app that had been running since he'd arrived at the gates. "This conversation, your admission of unauthorized research, your implied threats against my daughter Ritz, all being transmitted in real time to the Attorney General's office." Dr. Voss's smile faltered for the first time. "That's impossible. We're jamming all cellular signals in a 5-mile radius." "You're jamming civilian signals," Marcus corrected, "but not law enforcement. Emergency frequencies. And my phone has been modified to use those frequencies." The tactical team members were now looking between Dr. Voss and Marcus with obvious uncertainty. Their employer had just been caught in a lie about her authority, and the man they thought was a desperate father had just revealed himself to be several steps ahead of their operation. "Now," Marcus said, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority, "you're going to take me to my daughter, and then you're going to explain exactly what kind of research requires imprisoning innocent civilians and running unauthorized military operations on American soil." Dr. Voss's hand moved toward something in her jacket. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Mr. Rivera. You see, you've already seen too much." But as her hand emerged with a small device that looked like a detonator, the sound of helicopters filled the air. Marcus looked up to see 3 state police choppers approaching fast, their spotlights cutting through the gathering dusk. "You were right about one thing," Dr. Marcus said over the growing roar of the rotors. "I am Governor Chen's bloodhound, and when his bloodhound goes missing during an unauthorized investigation, he sends the entire pack." Dr. Voss's face went white as she realized the magnitude of her miscalculation. She'd thought she was dealing with a desperate father. Instead, she'd walked into a trap set by a man who'd spent decades taking down people exactly like her. But as the helicopters settled into landing positions around the compound, Marcus heard something that made his blood turn to Issa's scream. From inside the house, a young woman's scream. Sophia's scream. The scream cut through the helicopter noise like a blade, and Marcus was moving before conscious thought took over. 3 tactical team members blocked his path to the house, but years of physical training and a father's desperation made him a force they weren't prepared for. His shoulder caught the first man's center mass, sending him sprawling. The second reached for his sidearm, but Marcus's elbow connected with his solar plexus, dropping him to his knees, gasping. The third managed to draw his weapon before Marcus closed the distance and twisted it from his grip with a move that left the man's wrist at an unnatural angle. Sophia Marcus roared as he hit the front door. Dr. Voss was shouting orders into her radio. "Initiate Protocol 7. All samples to be destroyed immediately." The house's interior had been gutted and converted into a laboratory. Stainless steel equipment lined the walls. Computer monitors displayed data streams in languages Marcus didn't recognize, and the smell of chemicals burned his nostrils. But it was the sound coming from the basement that drove him forward. Sophie's voice, weak but alive, calling for help. He found the basement door and yanked it open. The stairs descended into a nightmare that made his investigative experience seem tame. The basement had been converted into holding cells, each containing what appeared to be ranch workers and cattle drivers. But they weren't just imprisoned, were connected to medical equipment, IV lines running into their arms. "Dad," Sophia's voice came from the third cell. She was alive, conscious, but pale and weak. "They've been drugging us, taking blood samples. They said they were testing for some kind of contamination." "But it's not contamination," interrupted a voice from the first cell. Marcus turned to see Jake Blackstone, the ranch owner's son, strapped to a medical table. "They're not testing for contamination, they're creating it." Before Marcus could process this revelation, footsteps pounded down the stairs behind him. He spun to see Dr. Voss, flanked by two men in hazmat suits, each carrying syringes filled with a luminescent green substance. "Step away from the cells, Mr. Rivera," Dr. Voss commanded. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. Then explain." Marcus said, positioning himself between the syringes and the cells. "Explain why you're imprisoning American citizens and conducting illegal medical experiments." Dr. Voss's eyes gleamed with the fervor of someone who believed her cause justified any means. "We're saving the world, Mr. Rivera. The pathogen we've developed will target specific genetic markers found in 60% of the global population. But first, we need to test the vaccine on a control group." Marcus felt sick. "You're talking about biological warfare." "I'm talking about population control," she corrected. "The Earth can't sustain current population levels. Someone has to make the hard choices." One of the hazmat-suited men stepped forward with his syringe. "The test subjects have served their purpose. The vaccine data is complete. Protocol 7 requires elimination of all witnesses." Marcus realized with growing horror that the green substance wasn't a vaccinate, was a lethal injection. They were planning to murder everyone in these cells, including his daughter. But 30 years of law enforcement had taught him that the most dangerous moments often presented the best opportunities. The helicopter sounds outside had stopped, which meant the state police were now on the ground. And Dr. Voss had made a critical error. She was explaining her plan instead of executing it. "You made one mistake," Dr. Marcus said, slowly reaching into his jacket. "And what's that? You assumed I came here alone?" Marcus pulled out what looked like a standard investigator's badge, but as he held it up, a brilliant strobe light began flashing from its center. The basement erupted in chaos as the hidden team of federal agents who had been monitoring his investigation burst through every entrance to the house simultaneously. Federal agents, everyone on the ground. Dr. Voss spun toward the stairs, but Agent Sarah Kim was already there, weapon drawn. Behind her, a full tactical team spread through the basement with military precision. "Catherine Voss, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit bioterrorism, kidnapping, and about 20 other federal charges." "I'm going to enjoy reading to you," Kim announced. The hazmat-suited men dropped their syringes and raised their hands. But Marcus was already at Sophia's cell, using bolt cutters that Agent Kim tossed him to break the lock. "Dad, how did you?" Sophia collapsed into his arms as he freed her from the 4 lines. "Later, sweetheart. First we get you medical attention." But as federal agents secured the scene and began freeing the other prisoners, Agent Kim pulled Marcus aside. "We've got a problem. The computer systems upstairs show that this facility was just one node in a network. There are 17 other locations, and our raid here just triggered an automatic alert to all of them." Marcus felt his relief evaporate. Meaning they know we're onto them. And according to the data we're seeing, they've already begun Phase 2 at the other sites. Jake Blackstone, now free from his restraints but still weak, grabbed Marcus's arm. "Phase 2 isn't just testing. They're planning to release the pathogen at the state fair next weekend. 50,000 people, all concentrated in one location." Marcus stared at him. "The state fair. That's in 3 days. And according to these computers," Agent Kim added grimly, "they've already positioned teams at the fairgrounds. We're not just dealing with a research operation anymore, we're looking at an imminent terrorist attack." Dr. Voss, now in restraints, laughed from where she sat on the basement floor. "You're too late. Even if you stop the state fair, there are 16 other release points scheduled for the same weekend. Football games, concerts, shopping centers. By Monday morning, the pathogen will be in the water supply of 6 major cities." Marcus felt the weight of the situation crushing down on him. He'd saved his daughter, but in doing so, he'd stumbled into something far bigger than a kidnapping. They were looking at a coordinated bioterror attack that could kill millions. But as federal agents began uploading data from the computers, Marcus noticed something that made his investigative instincts flare. "Agent Kim, look at this." He pointed to a financial document on one of the screens. "The funding for this operation, it's not coming from foreign terrorists or domestic extremists." Kim leaned in to read the screen, her expression growing dark. "Jesus Christ." "The money trail leads back to 3 pharmaceutical companies and a defense contractor," Marcus finished, "all of whom would profit massively from both the pathogen release and the subsequent demand for treatment." Sophia, still weak but alert, grabbed her father's arm. "Dad, there's something else. While they were holding us, I heard them talking about someone called the architect. They said he was untouchable because he had protection at the highest levels of government." Marcus and Agent Kim exchanged looks. The conspiracy wasn't just bigger than they'd thought, it went higher up the chain than anyone could have imagined. "We need to get to Washington," Marcus said. "If there's someone in the government protecting this operation, we need to find them before next weekend." But as they headed toward the basement stairs, Dr. Voss called out one last piece of information that made everyone freeze. "You still don't understand, do you?" she said with a twisted smile. "The man who authorized my release from federal prison. The man who gave me the resources to build this network. The man who's been protecting our operation from the very beginning." Marcus turned back, dreading the answer. "Governor Chen," she said. "Your beloved patron. The man who gave you the authority that brought you here tonight. He's the architect." The basement fell silent, except for the sound of Marcus's world crashing. Down around him, the man he'd trusted, the man he'd worked for, the man who had sent the helicopters to rescue him, was the same man orchestrating the largest bioterror attack in American history. And Marcus had just handed him detailed intelligence on how to stop the only people who could prevent it. The silence in the federal command vehicle stretched like a taut wire as Marcus stared at the evidence spread across 3 monitors: bank transfers, encrypted communications, and travel records, all pointing to Governor Chen as the architect of a bioterror network that spanned 17 states. "It can't be right," Marcus said for the 3rd time, but his voice lacked conviction. The financial trail was too detailed, too precise to be manufactured. Agent Kim pulled up another screen. "Voice analysis confirms it's Chen on these recorded calls with Dr. Voss. And look at this." She highlighted a series of dates. "Every time your investigations got close to exposing corruption in state contracts, Chen redirected you to different cases. He wasn't protecting the state from corruption, he was protecting his network from you." Sophia, now receiving 4 fluids from a federal medic, spoke up from her stretcher. "Dad, remember when you told me about that pharmaceutical case last year? The one Chen pulled you off at the last minute?" Marcus's blood went cold. Meridian Biotech. He said it was a jurisdictional issue, that the feds would handle it. "Meridian Biotech is one of the primary funders of this operation," Agent Kim confirmed. "Chen didn't pull you off because of jurisdiction. He pulled you off because you were about to expose his business partners." The command vehicle's radio crackled to life. "Agent Kim, this is command. We've got a problem. Governor Chen has just issued an executive order declaring a state emergency and mobilizing the National Guard. He's claiming the raid on Blackstone Ranch revealed an imminent terrorist threat that requires martial law." Marcus felt the trap closing. Around them, he's using martial law to lock down the other sites. "We won't be able to get teams to them without going through state authorities he controls." But Agent Kim was already reaching for her secure phone. "Not necessarily. Chen's authority ends at state lines, and this operation crosses into federal jurisdiction. We can invoke the National Security Act," and she stopped mid-sentence as her phone displayed an incoming call from a blocked number. "Answer it," Marcus said grimly. "We all know who it is." Agent Kim put the call on speaker. Governor Chen's familiar voice filled the vehicle, but it carried none of the warmth Marcus remembered from their past conversations. "Marcus, my old friend? I'm disappointed. After everything I've done for your career, this is how you repay me, by stopping you from committing mass murder." Marcus shot back. "Chen, why? Why would you do this?" The line paused then. "Because sometimes leaders have to make impossible choices. Marcus, the world is dying. Climate change, resource depletion, social collapse is all inevitable unless someone takes action." "Action? You're talking about genocide." "I'm talking about survival," Chen replied coldly. The pathogen targets specific genetic markers that correlate with lower intelligence, higher aggression, and reduced environmental consciousness. I'm not destroying humanity, I'm saving it by removing the elements that are destroying it. Sophia struggled to sit up on her stretcher, her voice shaking with anger. You kidnapped innocent people and experimented on them like lab rats. Miss Rivera, Chen's voice took on a patronizing tone. Your father has filled your head with outdated concepts like individual rights and due process. The future requires sacrifice from the few to save the many. Marcus realized with crystal clarity that the man he'd respected for years was completely insane. Chen, stand down. It's over. The federal government knows everything, does it? Chen's voice carried a note of amusement. Marcus, you've been an excellent investigator, but you've always been too focused on the trees to see the forest. You really think I could have built this network without allies in Washington? Agent Kim's face went pale as she checked her secure communications. Sir, I'm showing communication blackouts with FBI headquarters, Homeland Security, and the Pentagon. Someone's jamming our federal frequencies. That would be Secretary Morrison, Chen explained helpfully. Defense contractors are very interested in the applications of our research. Amazing how many problems can be solved when you remove the inconvenient elements of the population. Marcus felt the full scope of the conspiracy hitting him like a physical blow. This wasn't just a rogue governor. This was a coordinated attack on American democracy by people at the highest levels of government. But as despair threatened to overwhelm him, Marcus remembered something his training officer had told him. Years ago, when you're outnumbered and outgunned, don't think about winning the war. Think about winning the next 5 minutes. Chen Marcus said, You made one critical error. And what's that? You assumed that because you corrupted the system itself was corrupt. Marcus looked at Agent Kim, who was already understanding his meaning, but you forgot about the people who served the system, not the other way around. Agent Kim was typing rapidly on her keyboard, bypassing official channels and sending direct communications to field agents across 17 states, all federal personnel. This is Agent Kim, FBI Counterterrorism. Execute Operation Clean Sweep under emergency protocols. All state authority is hereby suspended under the National Security Act. Marcus continued talking to keep Chen distracted. You also forgot that I didn't become an investigator to serve politicians, Chen. I became an investigator to serve justice. Justice, Chen laughed. Marcus, you're in a federal vehicle that I can track, communicating on frequencies I can monitor, trying to stop an operation that has already begun. In exactly, Marcus heard papers rustling 47 minutes. The first pathogen release will occur at the Houston Livestock Show. By midnight, 6 more locations will follow. But Agent Kim was smiling as she looked at her screen. Sir, Agent Patterson in Houston reports they've secured the livestock show. Agent Rodriguez has the Miami Beach concert venue. Agent Thompson has the Denver shopping center. Up at Marcus, all 17 locations are now under federal control. The silence from Chen's end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Impossible, he finally said. You don't have the authority to override state jurisdictions without approval from Secretary Morrison. Agent Kim interrupted. The same Secretary Morrison who's been under FBI surveillance for 6 months due to irregularities in defense contracting. The same Secretary Morrison who was arrested 23 minutes ago. Marcus felt a grim satisfaction as he heard Chen's breathing become ragged over the phone. You see, Chen, Marcus said, while you were building your network, the FBI was building a bigger one. Every corrupt official, every compromised contractor, every dirty politician, we've been watching all of them. Your operation didn't just expose your own crimes, it exposed everyone you were working with. Agent Kim held up her phone, showing a news alert. Governor Chen, you're under federal indictment for bioterrorism, conspiracy to commit mass murder, and treason. I suggest you surrender peacefully. But instead of surrender, Chen's voice took on a desperate edge. If I can't complete the operation, I can at least ensure there are no witnesses to testify against me. The line went dead. Marcus looked at Agent Kim with growing alarm. What did he mean by that? She was already pulling up satellite feeds on her laptop, the Blackstone Ranch. He still has people there. And she stopped, her face going white. The laboratory. They left behind enough pathogen to contaminate the entire water table if it's released. Through the command vehicle's windows, Marcus could see the ranch house in the distance, and rising from behind it, a column of black smoke that could only mean one thing: Chen's people were destroying evidence, including the containment systems that kept the pathogen secure. How long before it reaches the groundwater? Marcus asked. Based on the geological surveys, maybe 20 minutes. Marcus was already moving toward the vehicle's exit. Then we have 19 minutes to stop it. Sophia grabbed his arm as he passed her stretcher. Dad, you can't. You're not trained for hazmat. Containment. He knelt beside her, taking her hand. Sweetheart, I've spent 30 years cleaning up other people's messes. This is just one more. But as Marcus prepared to face the most dangerous moments of his career, Agent Kim called out one final piece of information that changed everything. Wait, the satellite feeds show Chen's not just destroying evidence, he's heading to the ranch himself. This is personal for him now. Marcus paused at the vehicle door. After everything they'd been through, after all the betrayal and corruption they'd uncovered, it was going to come down to a final confrontation between two men who had once trusted each other, and now had every reason to destroy each other. Looked back at Sophia one more time, memorizing her face in case he didn't make it back. Tell your mother I love her, he said, and tell her that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. Then Marcus Rivera stepped out into the night to face the man who had been both his greatest ally and his most dangerous enemy, knowing that only one of them would walk away from the Blackstone Ranch alive.